It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Also live on Facebook and YouTube, having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. And I want to welcome back to the microphones here, representing the 49th Senatorial District of Pennsylvania here in Erie County, Senator Dan Laughlin. Good to see you, Senator.
Joel, it's always nice to be on your show. Really looking forward to it, and I feel like our conversations are always pretty lively.
You realize we've been doing this over 6 years now.
Maybe even a little longer than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know we've talked, before I got on the air, but I mean, it's amazing to think when you go back to 2019 and the touch and go, for example, of the Erie district, for example, right? I mean, all of those, all those things are kind of coming home to roost.
Well, I think the exciting part for me, at least, Joel, is a lot of the work that I've done over the last 8.5 years is really starting to take hold, and you're starting to see the fruits of our efforts over those years. So,
well, especially when you talk about the CRIZ, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But I mean, making the investments, seeing forward momentum, in the management journals or the books, right? They're Jim Collins. You got to turn that flywheel.
Yeah.
But it takes so much effort to turn that wheel at first, and then it gets some momentum.
Yeah, we're starting to get some momentum, and look, I'm an optimistic person. I think our local region is really looking up. I really do. I believe that with all my heart.
All right, before I jump into issues, can we talk a little bit of politics?
Sure.
We had a pretty substantial night 1 week ago today. Tuesday night, we are going to get a new mayor.
Yeah, I saw that.
Thoughts?
Look, I sit here as someone who likes and appreciates Joe Schember, right?
Yeah.
I think he's done a decent job with the city. I didn't agree with all of his financial decisions, and I'm friends with Daria as well. So from my standpoint as a Republican senator working with a Democratic city, I'm happy that I could work with either of those folks for mayor. And look, I know we have a Republican candidate, for mayor as well, but realistically, in a more than 2-to-1 district, that's probably pretty slim where we'll have a Republican mayor. But look, I worked with Daria when she was worked at Erie Public Schools, and have a good working relationship with her. And I look forward to working with her to try and make our city better.
You had that win. It was kind of like a sweep of women, and you work with a lot of female colleagues in the Senate, right? I mean, it is becoming
it's pretty diverse as far as that goes, And look, I think you need a lot of voices at the table. Everybody brings a different perspective, and I think we're going to get good things done over the next 3 or 4 years.
And any comment on Christina Vogel? That's kind of an upset, at least on as far as money spent in that race. Of course, they're going to be challenging Brenton Davis, which is going to be a tough battle in the fall. County executive.
Look, that's going to obviously be one of our premier races this fall. Certainly one to watch. From Erie County perspective, for sure. I don't have a crystal ball on that. I don't know how that's going to play out. I know Brent, fairly well. I know he's a hard worker. I know everybody doesn't agree with him, but he puts in a good day's work every day. And I think at the end of the day, or at the end of the election cycle, if you will, if you're doing 80% of what people want, isn't that the old saying?
Right. Yeah.
So I think some of the things that Brent has been able to do will play out fairly well.
Yeah, it's interesting, at least for city politics. the Republicans are hopeful, but they would have to really up their game on organization and getting out the vote, because you would have to win every single vote.
Yeah, I mean it's more than 2-1.
Right.
It's like, not a ton more, but it's more than a 2-1 advantage the Democrats have in the city. Obviously, maybe if my open primaries bill had passed,
that's a good. We mentioned you last week.
It would be, perhaps the landscape would have changed a little more.
Yeah.
Look, locally, for the city controller race, we had a 3-way Democratic race for that. And I'm sure a few of your viewers know I kind of weighed in on that a little bit, and I got the result that I was looking for. So, as far as that goes, it's not that the state Senate's going to work with the city controller that much. But, we have a Republican running for that seat, and Brooks and Filippo now, and, I'm friends with both of them. So I think I'm pretty well positioned as far as working with the city.
Finally, weigh in on the low voter turnout. I feel like, whether you like the results or not, you have less than, what was it, 10,000 people choosing basically who our mayor is going to be. Again, with all due respect to the Republican candidate, but...
Yeah, look, we're talking in reality here, right?
Yeah.
It's disappointing to see turnout that low when there's so much at stake.
95,000 people in the city, 10,000 voting.
10,000 voting. That's pretty sad, really.
Yeah. All right. We'll drop it there because we have a lot.
We have good stuff to talk about.
We have good stuff to talk about too. Well, I mean, let me pick at it one more time here, because you mentioned open primaries doesn't pass. Darn it, we still don't have an increase in our minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like these really, duh.
Yeah.
That's me talking. Kinds of things.
Look, it seems like no matter what you want to do in the legislature, there's a group that opposes it, right? I mean,
kind of the Thomas Massey effect or something?
It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you could pick any topic under the sun, and there'll be a group that's for it and a group that's opposed to it, right?
Yeah.
But from my standpoint, at least, raising the minimum wage, that's kind of low hanging fruit at this point. I mean, if anybody pulls out their smartphone right now and goes on Indeed.com and looks at local jobs, the reality of it is the minimum wage is probably somewhere in the $12 to $14 an hour range.
Right.
So, is raising it going to change people's lives much? Probably not, because it's industry has already taken care of that. And yet, it's still a talking point that makes Pennsylvania kind of look bad, that, from that standpoint. Like, look, there might not be many people making that, but it's still a talking point. So I think there's some space that we could find common ground there. Maybe it's 10, whatever it is.
You had a whole system laid out.
Right.
Did that ever get out of committee, or?
We've made varying progress on that. And
usually you do this bipartisan with friend from Philly or somewhere, right? I mean,
I work across the aisle all the time. I find that is a much better way to try and get things done anyway.
Does that give some fuel for the fire from the real hardliners on the right, though?
Well, it's not that I don't get a little bit of pushback on some of the stuff that I'm trying to do from the, kind of the hard right, if you will.
Yeah.
But, to be fair to them, Joel, they're kind of representing their districts, too.
True.
A lot of these folks are in what we would refer to as bright red areas, if we're going to color code our political system, which that still bothers me, by the way.
Yeah.
But, there's areas of the state that are, more Republican than Erie is Democratic, and, they elect a representative, right?
Yeah.
And so, you got to work through these issues and try. And what I have found is in some of these more controversial things is you have to have something in the bill where they can go back to their constituents and say, I might not have loved this, but this is why I voted for that. And,
okay.
It doesn't matter why, but if they can go to their constituents and say, yeah, that might not have been our favorite thing, but this is the reason why I did that, and then most of their constituents, oh, okay, I at least see your point.
Let me just do another editorial comment because I think this is interesting.
You're kind of fired up today, aren't you?
Well, we haven't talked in a while, but the other part of this whole thing is, you know what? They, in the Bright Reds, haven't had to fight a Julie Slomsky or Jim Wirtz. I mean, they haven't had millions of dollars spent against them.
Right.
That's a different. You're in a different position.
It's a much different perspective.
Yeah.
It is a much different perspective, and it's not that I don't have political discussions downstate sometimes.
Yeah.
But holding a seat like I do takes a certain skill level politically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna drop it. Yeah. But no, I mean
you don't have to drop it. I can see you're excited today.
Well, I am because I'm again editorial. I'm tired of Pennsylvania just not looking like the best and the brightest as far as in the mix of the United States when it comes to policy, when it comes to outcomes. I mean, heck, we probably spend more on education than almost anybody per capita.
We're definitely up there.
But we still have issues like 70% graduation rates.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh.
Well, it's not a super popular topic, but school choice is one of the things that the Senate Republicans passed in Shapiro's first budget, and as you recall, he vetoed that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's been proven that you need a thriving K through 12 public system, and typically in areas where there's school choice, it makes the public schools better as well.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Everybody's up a notch. All right. We are gonna turn to policy here in a second here, but we've got to take a break. Dan Laughlin is with us, senator from Erie, the 49th district. You are tuned to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Senator Dan Laughlin is with us here in studio on the Joel Natale Show, and let's talk about something that's kind of concerning us, and I think it concerns you, Senator, is this proliferation of skills games. Now, first off, I want to make sure I understand what's going on here. Is there not licensing of these machines?
Yeah. Look, for the average consumer, right, that walks into maybe a convenience store or a tavern or whatever, they have no idea what game they're playing, whether it's a quote unquote illegal slot machine or a skill game, because there is a difference. Okay, I think their official company name is Pennsylvania Skill, and they won a PA Supreme Court case that their games aren't technically gambling because it's a game of skill. Now, I think they're splitting hairs there.
Right.
I mean, you put money in, typically you lose and you walk out. I mean, that's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
A few times I've sampled it just so I knew what I was talking about, right? I think they found a little tightrope they could walk through that. But the reality of it is, and I am mindful of the fact that a lot of clubs and bars and restaurants and things like that have a few of these machines in there, and it's helping their bottom line. And we're not trying to take it. I want to make it clear to anybody listening: we are not trying to stop them from having those. Right?
Okay.
It's just a matter of regulating it, taxing it at least a little bit. Our slot machines at our local casino, and a lot of areas don't have a casino either, so they don't care, right?
Right.
But our slot machines are taxed at 54%, and
that's like the highest in the country, right?
It's the highest in the world.
More than Macau,
Yeah. So and granted, those rates got negotiated before the neighboring states had legalized gambling. And things like that, so they were able to turn a profit at that rate, right? But things have changed. Clearly, the financial trajectory of Presque Isle Downs has changed significantly because now Ohio has gambling, New York has gambling, the reservation an hour from here has gambling, and they're all taxed at a significantly lower rate than Presque Isle Downs is. And our casinos across the state, it's not just Presque Isle Downs, but the ones that are more inbound or further away from a border aren't hit as hard as Presque Isle is.
Mm-hmm.
And then right here in town, Chris, my staffer here, toured the one facility. There's like 25 basically slot machines, and that's the entirety of the business. There's no tavern that's supporting it. It is literally just a miniature casino, and it's untaxed.
I think I saw one at 29th and
I'm not going to call.
Okay,
I'm not going to call the business out because they're still operating legally, right?
Right. Okay.
But the point is it's completely untaxed and unregulated.
So there is no tax. Is there even like a city amusement tax?
Well, I mean, technically, Joel, you could argue, well, the operator is making money and they will pay income tax on that, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, let's face it, 90% of what's going in those machines is cash.
But I mean, Pac-Man used to have to have a label on it, didn't it? When we were coming up?
I think so.
Right.
I was terrible at Pac-Man, too.
I did like Centipede myself. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, it just, how did this happen that we would have this whole source of money exchange without the government at least reaching in to get a little bit of it?
Well, honestly, it's a matter of fairness, too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that we have these little, we'll just call them mini casinos for a talking point here. You have these popping up, and now, like the tavern and the restaurant and the VFW that had 2 or 3 of these machines in there that were helping their bottom line, now they don't even have as many players there because the people that actually enjoy doing this, they might just go to the mini casino, right?
The corner one, yeah.
So they clearly need to be regulated. We need to settle in on, I think what. As we battle it out, what is a reasonable tax rate?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard anywhere from 15% to 35%. What I suspect it'll probably wind up around 20%. And I know people will gripe about that, but picture paying 54 because that's what our casinos are paying. And honestly, if we were if we were playing a level playing field there, they'd be taxed at 54%.
Do you feel like that we'll have to revisit some of the gaming, the racino rules to maybe
Probably.
because I'm hearing that they can't afford horses anymore. If you can't do horses, then you can't really have a casino with a racetrack.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw this out there too, just as a talking point. I'm not opposed to gambling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't do it, but maybe it's because I'm terrible at it too. But at the end of the day, if there's 10 people in a room and they each have $100 and you throw a deck of cards in there and they gamble all day, there's still only $1,000 in that room. That doesn't change. It's not like manufacturing where you can take $1,000 in raw product or raw material and you create something and maybe you sell it for $2,000. That brings wealth to your communities. Gaming is just, it exists. People like to do it, but it's not really, it's not great for your community, if you will, if you look at the big picture on it.
Yeah, it's not that much of a draw. Vegas, people go to Vegas, to gamble. It's not doing that.
Yeah, and from the state standpoint, we're getting tax money off it, so it helps our bottom line. But in the reality of that even is, well, the money came out of your citizens' pockets already, so now they're probably spending less money on something else.
I got less than a minute with Senator Laughlin before the news break. Do we get any money from these online casinos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. I don't know the exact tax rate on that,
but I mean, the state participates in that.
Yeah, when we pass the online gaming where you can gamble on your phone, there's definitely taxes tied to that, and it's geofenced. They know if you're within the state lines. It's amazing, the technology. They know. Trust me, they know where you're at.
That's astounding. Yeah. All right, so you've done a couple things. You've proposed also a piece where you don't have to have so many slot machines if they're unprofitable, right? At the actual casinos.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we'll be able to get that to the governor's desk. You know what I mean? There's always pushback, but from the casino standpoint, and having multiple meetings with them, and visiting their sites, they have just tons of machines just sitting around because they're not as busy as they used to be, taking up floor space where they could put other things in that might bring revenue. And I think that the best talking point from the casino folks was, if it was better revenue, we would definitely do that.
They're in the business of making revenue. Yeah. Senator Dan Laughlin is with us. News is next. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. So glad you're tuned to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Senator Dan Laughlin is with us here in studio. We're talking about some of these crucial issues that can move Pennsylvania forward. And I want to talk about, you have an idea, Senator, about if you were able to tax some of the skills games revenues, maybe it would help with the proliferation part of this thing, but also it could be poured into a legacy fund. Can you explain what the Pennsylvania Legacy Fund might be?
Yeah, at this point in time, Joel, it is a concept that I have put out there, to try and get people to start talking about being a little more fiscally conservative, right? Mm-hmm. It's how I've run my life. Everything, virtually everything that I own now is paid off.
Yeah.
And I think that the state as a whole, if we created this legacy fund, would model it kind of like that, right? Kind of a savings account, not the rainy day fund. We already have that, but that can be dipped into. But anytime we need to, we've spent a fair amount out of that over the last 2 budget cycles. This would be more of a permanent savings account, where if we set it up correctly, the legislature could spend the interest out of it, but not the principal, and we would continue to add to the principal as revenue was available, right?
Sounds like an old-fashioned endowment kind of thing. You're creating an endowment.
Very similar to an endowment. There's a few other states that already have one. Alaska, I think, comes to mind as the first that I ever knew about, even from back when I was a kid. With their oil and gas industry up there, they created a legacy fund. I didn't check recently, but I know for a while people in Alaska paid no income tax, and they actually got a rebate check at the end of the year. Right. Does that sound familiar to you, Joel?
Yes, it sure does, yeah.
So it's just an attempt to be a little more fiscally responsible, and it's also a way to kind of bring home, and we talked about this earlier on the show, for people that might not love voting for legalizing skill games or regulating them, however you want to talk about it, or the cannabis, adult use cannabis. They might not love that, but they could go back to their constituents and say, look, this was coming anyway. At least we've included some fiscal responsibility, and that's going to be great for Pennsylvania for 100 years to come, right?
Yeah, it seems, let's talk about cannabis, because it seems like there's every which way to Sunday that you can get around the current laws and access cannabis. Is it to a point where you might as well have a comprehensive plan?
Yeah. Well, look, let's just talk openly and honestly here, Joel, right? That's why we're here. It's talk radio. Okay?
Exactly, yeah.
I think if we're honest with ourselves, probably 90% of the people with a medical card, it's not really medical, it's recreational. Maybe it's 80, pick a number, but we know it's not 100%, right?
Right.
It's like joining Sam's Club. And I hope Sam's Club doesn't sue me, but it's virtually the same thing.
Yeah, wow.
You get a $50 medical card, you can go buy all the cannabis you want, but from the state standpoint, it's barely taxed, right? And we have a roughly $3 to $4 billion hole in our budget this year, and we're basically just throwing money away. We have skill games that aren't taxed. We have cannabis that's being sold basically untaxed. We have a thriving black market in the cannabis space, and we haven't even touched on the subject of what I refer to as gas station weed. You can go into almost any vape shop in Pennsylvania and buy, literally bags of cannabis that they have somehow been able to call it something else. But let's face it, it is what it is. So for the folks that are like, well, we can't legalize cannabis because, whatever. Come on, it's already legal.
Have we figured out, though, the mitigation circumstances? Again, I've said to you multiple times, I don't want to be driving next to somebody who's high on weed. Do we know? Can we measure? When someone's under the influence?
We still do not have an accurate way test for like a DUI other than like a field sobriety test, because as you know, the THC stays in your system for about 30 days, so you can't really do a test for that to say, well, somebody smoked a joint on Friday and it's Monday morning. They're clearly not high, right?
Right.
But they would test positive for it. So we basically have the system that we're operating under right now is basically a field sobriety test that would have to be in conjunction with something else. The cop saw you swerving around or doing something else, which is similar. Honestly, it's very similar to like if you were taking a prescription drug, even if it's completely legal. Like let's say you broke your knee or you had knee surgery and you're taking oxycodone.
Yeah.
Well, it tells you on the bottle not to drive, right?
Right.
So they couldn't measure that because it's a legally prescribed drug for you. But if you're swerving down the road, they can still give you a DUI because of the way you were driving. So that's kind of the system we're operating under right now. Whether it's medical, whether it's gas station, whether it's illegal, it's all virtually the same. And we have basically a way to deal with it now. It's not perfect, clearly, but legalizing adult use cannabis won't change any of that.
So when you pitch this idea of these issues, whether it's skill games, cannabis, going into this legacy fund, what's some of the response that you get from your colleagues there?
Honestly, the response about this has been fairly positive. I think a lot of people live their lives a lot more fiscally conservative than the state lives its life, right? Yeah. And quite frankly, there are other revenue streams that we could direct into this if we chose to do so. There would take some legislative changes. One of the things, obviously our natural gas industry, Pennsylvania is sitting on so much natural gas, we could power the country for the next 100 years.
Wow.
And I know there's been talk, obviously, about an extraction tax and things like that that we don't have right now. We have the impact fee in lieu of that. But the state owns millions and millions of acres of ground, where if you drilled on that ground, right, you can call it an extraction fee or whatever you want.
Right.
We would get 100% of that money because it's our land. And then my argument on that is that if you're basically taking something that future generations could use, if you take it now and you put the money that you got for it into this legacy fund where it earned interest for the next 100 years, you are helping the future generations that maybe didn't get the direct impact from it.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It'd be interesting to see.
Well, that's why it's so tough in the legislature.
Exactly. Before I get off the cannabis thing, I want to ask you, you had a pretty negative reaction to the General Assembly's adoption of a cannabis bill from the Democratic side. They want to use a state store model.
Right.
And I'm like, state store model? Like, people hate the state stores. Well, yeah. I shouldn't say that, but they think it's kind of a backwards approach, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I think anybody that has traveled beyond Pennsylvania's borders and stopped into a neighboring state's liquor establishment, so to speak, knows that that you have a better variety, better pricing, better customer service, and that's not a dig on any of the local employees or anything like that. But it's just the difference between a state store model and a private enterprise is like the difference between fine dining and going to McDonald's. You could, it's both of them are serving food, but I don't think you're taking your spouse out to a nice dinner at McDonald's, right? And that's kind of how I view that. So there was virtually no support for the state store model.
Why do you think the Democrats advanced that?
I think they did it specifically because they knew it wouldn't make it through the Senate. And if since we're free to talk politics right now, I'm not sitting in my Senate office. It was a political move, quite frankly. I think they rushed to pass that and get it in there before the budget season, so they could walk around Harrisburg and go, "Look, we passed cannabis, and the Senate won't touch it." So it came to my committee, and I called it up for a vote in less than a week. I didn't twist anybody's arm, and it got voted promptly down.
Wow.
Even by the Democrats.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, well, there you go.
So we played a little bit of political chess with them, and I don't think they liked it.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a bipartisan bill coming out, being introduced in the Senate. You know, I would think almost in the next week or two between Senator Street and I. A lot more small business friendly, and I've talked to some of my counterparts in the House, and you know, at least the discussion is that they will copy our language, and if they can get that passed, then it puts me specifically in a different negotiating position, because if they pass my language, it's going to be a different story.
It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Let's pivot here. Before we go to the quiz, I want to talk about some big news out of higher ed. You have Penn State thinking about closing 7 Commonwealth campuses. Penn State Barron seems to be doing well. It's like number 2 of the Commonwealth campuses.
Yeah.
I know it's big money that goes into the Penn State system from the state, but they're saying, hey, our reimbursements are down from the legislature. Where are we at with higher ed? Because PASHE's having same kinds of issues, right?
Look, virtually every university is not. I shouldn't say virtually all of them. It's a few areas are growing, right?
Right.
But by and large, you know, Pennsylvania is shrinking. You know, certainly Erie County is shrinking, and many other areas of the state are shrinking, and they're losing students. And you know, over the last few years, you've also seen a little bit of a push, or maybe not a push, but a move away from higher ed, not totally away from higher ed, but more into, you know, trade schools and things like that.
Apprenticeships.
Because there's a lot more, you know, there's a lot more good family sustaining jobs in there, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of attrition as far as that move goes as well. And you know, if you look at higher ed as an industry, because that's literally what it is, any industry that is shrinking has to make cuts, and that's what's going on.
And are you feeling pressure that the state should pony up more in the budget for higher ed?
Well, I think the state has spent you know, a significant amount of money on higher ed, on education. Really, if you look at it from pre-K all the way through college, right. we spend, you know, a lot of money on it. We're certainly kind of at the head of the pack, if you will, as far as state spending. I think we're doing our job. You know, quite frankly, I think we were a little top heavy on how many choices we had for these students. Well,
yeah.
It's
when
better.
you think
I think
about 14 PASHE schools and how many at Penn State schools? I mean, plus you add Temple and Pitt.
Plus all the private universities.
Plus all the private, yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly no lack of places to get a higher ed education in Pennsylvania, and I think that's part of the issue. It became a little bit top heavy as far as just literally how many campuses there were. You know, we're fortunate locally that Penn State Barron is doing so well. It's one of our best performing campuses, and you know, I think I'm going to give him a shout out here. I think Dr. Ford's doing a great job up there. And you know, so you know, we have some high points as far as that goes, but across the state, there were many areas that aren't performing well, and you know, I think maybe it's unfortunate that they decided to cut all 7 at once, but sometimes you just pull the Band-Aid off and get it over with, right?
Yeah, I can see that. All right, we've got to talk about the quiz here and see where that is all at. What's interesting part of the bill that I didn't realize is that we find out what we're going to get, like, in October, and we have to spend it by December 31st. Do I have that right?
If I remember, I mean, it's been a while since we've worked on it, but I believe that is roughly accurate there, Joel.
That's fast, 90 days or something.
Well, it is and it isn't, though. But see, you know what's coming.
Okay.
So you need to be ready, right? and I think we have a pretty good board put together right now. I know they're taking project applications in and working their way through that. And we are in a unique position here because we included, I made sure this happened last year when we passed the tax code, that the premium tax that Erie Insurance pays in lieu of their corporate net income tax, was not previously a capturable tax for the CRIS, and pulled a little bit of political kung fu there and got that done. So we are literally going to have a fully funded CRIS right out of the gate, and the cap on it right now is $15 million. Now that will grow though. We put an inflation escalator built into the legislation.
I did not realize that. Wow.
So it's $15 million this year, but next year it might be up to 16. Depending on how much our inflation rate is.
Yeah.
So that is pretty exciting stuff, and it's interesting right now because in my meetings with some of the board members and whatnot, the biggest fear is that we won't have enough projects to fund with the money.
Well, let me ask you about that, because remember, it was Lancaster kind of got a slow start on their CRIS. Was that the similar issue?
Well, no. They had to grow their increment over time, which I know we're a little pressed for time here.
Yeah.
So as you grow your increment, that was the money that went into the CRIS fund.
Right.
Well, with Erie Insurance, basically,
that's
like
the game
we're
changer.
maxed out almost immediately. So we don't have that 5, 6, 8 year ramp up. We're full speed right out of the gate, and quite frankly, I think once our business community truly understands what's going on, I think you're going to see a flood of potential projects, and it's kind of funny, as long as I've worked on the CRIS, this 5-to-1 ratio as far as CRIS dollars and private dollars. Okay. I always had it backwards in my head because it almost made no financial sense to me that it seems like you should have to put 5 private dollars in and maybe get $1 of state help.
Yeah,
it's not. It's if you put a 1 private dollar in, you are eligible for 5 CRIS dollars.
Wow.
And with a return like that, I got to believe that between the opportunity zones, the federal opportunity zones that Erie has, and this program, we're going to see a flurry of investment into our town.
What kinds of projects, do you think that the CRIS can make a big impact? I'm thinking specifically. I know that either the zoo is part of the CRIS or they want to be, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, they want the zoo would like to be acquired by the
Erie
convention,
events,
Erie events, the convention center folks, whatever. And I'm not opposed to that, right? Mm-hmm. But taking care of the zoo was not the original intent of this legislation. So that's kind of one of those things where it's okay. Right. I love the zoo too, and
sure,
maybe we can take care of them.
But what's right in the pocket? What's in the bullseye of the CRIS? You think?
Well,
is it housing? Is it?
No, it's specifically not housing. It can be mixed use. Like if you want to build a building that has commercial space on the first floor or two, and then some.
I'm thinking the Ascend building is exactly that,
and then some apartments above.
Yeah.
That's okay. But you specifically can't do just housing projects with CRIS dollars.
Gotcha.
This is meant to be economic development. That's its goal. And quite frankly, my personal goal as far as the CRIS goes isn't just development, it's job creation. Because what I've seen over my lifetime living in this region is as good paying job leaves, so does the family. And so it's for me, at least in my head, the CRIS is always a job creator. That should be its number one goal.
Do you see a scenario where we're going to focus on brownfields? Erie Coke certainly is on this docket, and some of those reclamation projects, West 12th Street and so on.
Yeah. Look, I think it can be broad ranging, right? I think it can help with obviously it can be used for grants for small businesses. You know, like if you're a downtown business and I don't know, if you buy a pizza oven, you can have 5 more employees. It can help with things like that.
So
small stuff like that.
It's meant to be kind of flexible,
right.
that they could create loan fee grant or grant projects and things like that.
You can do grants with it.
Yeah.
You can fund infrastructure. One of the things that I am trying to do with this, which is a little bit of a stretch, in order to go outside the footprint of the CRIS itself, the actual footprint where it's drawn, it has to be infrastructure that will help the CRIS itself. And I think with a little bit of a wink and a nod, our airport falls under that guidelines. Now, that's a little ways out of the footprint.
I was going to say.
But, that's why we capped it with the state. So, how we spend our money regionally, I don't think it should matter to them downstate, and I don't think most of my counterparts down there would give me much pushback on that either.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, Reading, who got their CRIS authorization the same day we did, they also have an airport that is struggling, and I talked to their representative and their senator down there, and they love the idea as well. So, when you get a bipartisan, bicameral push like that, I don't think many people are going to give us too much grief over trying to help our airports out.
Final thought on the CRIS. When do we think that we're going to see, all the reporting's happening right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, we are in our base year, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think there are some forces at work in Erie that are willing to lend the CRIS Authority some money on the future increments to try and jumpstart this and get it going sooner, which is exciting for me, I can tell you that.
I would bet. Got to leave it there. Senator Dan Laughlin with us here. Again, we could just keep going and going and going because there's a lot. I mean, there is the political ramifications, there's the policy ramifications, and you know what? And we're gonna be in an election cycle, not with you, but with all the General Assembly here coming up very shortly.
Yeah.
And
it never seems to stop, huh?
It doesn't stop at all. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
It is just a couple minutes in front of 5 o'clock here on Talk Erie.